Hello, my guest today is Dr. David Prologo. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me and thank you for the welcome.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you here. Want to dig in and talk about the catching point and how we can transform our lives. But before we get there, let's back up and learn a little bit about you. Do you mind sharing some of your personal journey to from where you started this whole journey to where you are now?
Sure. It's a unique story for sure, as most of our stories are, I suppose. The universe kind of guides us into one place or another. So for me, I grew up around a lot of people who I loved very much, respect very much, and in fact, these people at that time were in their 40s and 50s, and I saw and had firsthand sort of experience with all of these diet failures. Right, I've had the prototypical aunt and mom and friend who were 40s, 50s, 200 plus pounds, wanted to lose weight, and continued to fail at it. And at that time, again, I think what is a typical arrangement. I was younger, involved in sports, and enjoyed eating clean, running, all this kind of thing. So I lived the disconnect. I couldn't understand why I was hearing that this was so hard, because for me it wasn't hard at all. I enjoyed running. In fact, I wanted to do it. I wanted to run. I enjoyed eating my oatmeal. It was so to hear someone tell me that it was too difficult to do and therefore I couldn't lose weight really kind of struck me and resonated with me and guided my life, to be honest with you. So from there, I went into medical school in large part because of this phenomenon that I had decided was some biological phenomenon that I had to learn about. And this idea that my mom and aunt and friends were failing the mind over matter game, I wasn't buying that because I was right there, right? And these are the same people who had wills of steel and were able to conquer all of these other difficult things like college and night classes and financial difficulties and raising boys and all this kind of stuff. So it just didn't match, and so that kind of kicked me into that direction. I trained for many, many, many years and ended up becoming what's called an interventional radiologist, and all that means is we use CT and other radiology guidance systems to do procedures with needles. So that became my job. At the same time, I got a certification in obesity medicine because I remembered why I started all this and wanted to be able to formally get in there and change the tides. So that's how I ended up where I am today with this dual board certification and this unique practice. And there are some other stories that came out of that, but I don't want to talk too much and monopolize the whole thing right out of the gate.
All right, and yeah, we're going to get there, but let's back
Okay.
up because you said a couple of very interesting things there. First of all, you had this personal experience as a young man of being fit and enjoying it, right? You enjoyed that lifestyle, you enjoyed exercising, you enjoyed eating healthy, and you had set up this system where that was rewarding and enjoyable for you. And at the same time, you're looking at other people close to you and saying, well, why can't these people figure this out, right? And I think what you're describing is you're noticing this disconnect, right, between the well, they have the willpower, they have the intelligence. What I don't understand, what's not working here. So let's start our discussion here. You saw these people diet, you saw these people fail, and I think all of my listeners, everybody here, can relate to going on a diet, maybe a New Year's resolution, being really gung ho, being motivated, being having just steal willpower for that first month, or first week, first 6 months, whatever it is, but ultimately it fails. Why do diets fail?
Oh gosh, so what a great question. So we can unpack the answer to that hopefully in some sort of logical fashion. So the first thing I want to say before getting specifically to why diets fail is that a big thing that I hope to address with all of this, right? And what I say to folks when I talk, and thank you for giving me this platform to talk, is that I'm lucky enough to have a day job, and it's pretty busy, as you saw when we tried to start this
Yeah.
podcast. So my motivation for being out here and writing this book and all that, it isn't a career move. It isn't an attempt to make money or anything like that. My motivation was to get the message out about the answer to this question: why do diets fail? And to make the point clearly that the reason they fail is not a mind over matter issue, right? So I'll come back to that. So the disconnect that you mentioned is the most important thing. I think that's the, if I can say one thing or people hear one thing, it's this, to understand this disconnect. When you're exercising and maintaining a lean physique and enjoying yourself and so on and so forth, that is a distinct thing. Boom, we bound it. It is what it is. When you are overweight and your goal is to make a change from overweight to lean, that is a different project. And so the disconnect materializes out of the flawed thinking that I can do task B, which is make a change, by performing the activities from task A, which is a whole bunch of lean people who are just maintaining their physique. And so the analogy I like to draw is that if for some reason you decided you wanted to be a surgeon, that it wouldn't be reasonable for you to ask me for the steps to a cardiac surgery that I do, say. I hand over the steps and you start on Monday doing surgeries, right? That wouldn't make any sense. But that is exactly the disconnect that we live in now. We take the what I call the always lean population, we ask them for their directions and programs to do a totally different task, which is making a change. And then we find over and over again that that doesn't work, right? So that's where the disconnect is, and that leads into the answer: why do diets fail? Diets fail because those folks who are trying to make a change, when they embark on a calorie restriction and oftentimes simultaneous exercise program, their bodies react with very well described, meaning that these are things that you can prove and show. These aren't Dave Prologo ideas. Very well described, very well documented biological responses materialize that block you. What kinds of things? The example that people can usually understand right out of the gate is your body perceives this abrupt reduction in your food, reduction in calorie availability as starvation. So your body is wired to survive. So the first thing it does when it senses that you're doing this or that there's less food available is it slows its metabolism. It says, look, we have to live. And if we're going to have less food to eat, we better slow down the internal workings of everything so that we don't die, right? And so you cut your calories by 500, your body slows its metabolism by 400 and offsets you. And this is the patient who then shows up in your office a month later and says, I did everything you told me to do and I didn't lose a pound, right? And that is true. That is true. Your body responded. It offset what you tried to do. I understand that you didn't lose a pound. But but that's one of the things that crops up to block you, right? The body has overwhelming hunger signals that it will fire through nerves. It'll spill hunger hormone into your bloodstream. These are all things the body is going to do to fight you because the body doesn't want to starve. And that is the truth. That is what we know for sure. That is what I've written in the book so people will understand why they go through these things and fail. And that is also the antithesis of what is actually happening. What should happen is what we just said. We understand from a medical standpoint that these things crop up and block you and make this calorie restriction non-sustainable and undoable for you. But that's not what we say. What we say instead is, you must really not want it, or you must be somehow eating Doritos in the closet or doing something that you're not telling me, because if you did this, and this is probably the thing that I hate the most. It's mathematics. It's simple math.
Yeah.
Calories. It's so
Calories in,
not
calories out.
simple
Yeah.
math.
Right.
so so
No,
so
it's not
that's why
simple at
diets
all.
fail. Diets fail
Yeah.
because we're not wired to diet. We're wired to survive, and we
Right.
can't stay on these diets because our body will fight us every step of the way.
Our bodies will fight us every step of the way. That's very well said. So we had Dr. Rick Johnson on a while back. You're probably familiar with him. He wrote the book, or I don't know if you are or not, but he wrote us a book called Nature Wants Us to Be Fat. Kind of that same similar story, right? You are evolutionarily designed to store fat. That's a good thing from an evolutionary standpoint.
Right.
And what's happened is we've evolved so quickly and culturally and technologically, societally, that our bodies haven't kept up, right? So now we're in this, there is no food scarcity, but for most of us, right? It's this crazy food abundance, and the food that's abundant is easy and not very we can get into a whole other rabbit hole about processed and ultra processed food.
Hmm.
But what you're saying then is what works for me as a fairly lean, fit person who enjoys this sort of a lifestyle isn't going to be the same recipe for success for somebody who has, say, 40 pounds to lose, right? Because
Correct.
we're starting from different physiological states, right? We're in different
Correct.
places. So
And you have different goals. You have different goals.
we
So I'm
probably
sorry
have
to
different
interrupt you, but
goals, right?
you have different goals. These are two different tasks. Making a
Yes, they are
change
two different tasks.
is a different task than maintenance activity.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is then so that person that's overweight and they start this diet that we're going to start on Monday. It's a new week, new me, and they're going to
Hmm.
go on
Hmm.
this calorie deficit. They're probably going to throw in some exercises. They're going to make these
Hmm.
radical changes, right? And their body's going to respond by, I think what you're describing is metabolically adapting, right? They're going to say,
Right.
okay, we've got less calories coming in here all of a sudden. Holy shit, this is not good. Let's rearrange some things
Correct.
hormonally, etc., so that we're prepared in case of a famine, right? Or
That's
in
right.
case of
That's
food
exactly
scarcity.
right.
Yeah. All right. So that being the case, then what is our prescription then for this person if diets don't work?
Hmm.
Somehow people do, the majority of people don't, but people do go from being obese or overweight to being lean long term. It's a small percentage of people.
Right.
What are some of those factors for success?
So these are such great questions. I think it's the best podcast I've ever been on. So the
Right.
these
Virtual
or at
high
least
five.
or
Yeah.
at least gets at exactly what I want to say. So thank
All
you.
right. Well, good.
So how would you do that, right? So how would you answer that question? Because that is the way to answer it from a scientific standpoint. Why don't we find the cohort of people, albeit a small number, and see what they did, right? And that's exactly what the National Weight Registry did. They found these folks who were successful and sustained their weight loss, a small number of them, and then they characterize them. What kinds of things did they do, and how did they do this, and what makes them different from the other 99% of people that fail, right? And so this is also I know we're talking about a book. I apologize, but it's true that this is also what we spell out in the book, because I was for the longest time, kind of trying to preach from the mountaintop that this really wasn't people's fault that they couldn't stay on these diets. I would even go so far as to say it's nearly impossible to do so. 99 out of 100 people are failing, and I wanted that to be my message. But every time somebody would come in afterwards and say, okay, well, then what? Is it
Yeah.
hopeless? Is that what you're saying? And I said, no, it's not hopeless. The key to this is, instead of focusing on whatever your mathematical calorie deficit is going to be, or your exercise program is going to be, take your focus completely off of that, forget it, throw it out, and focus on the things that were stopping you, and let's mitigate that. Here's why. There are famous papers that are out in the scientific literature, probably the most famous of which, and there's a recent one about intermittent fasting, actually, in the New England Journal of Medicine. But the other one that I want to describe to you was in the Journal of American Medical Association, where they compared all the diets, the Zone diet, Ornish diet, Atkins diet, and they wanted to answer the question, which diet, quote unquote, works, right? And what did they find out from this study and many others subsequently? That the only variable that correlates with success is adherence. And it might seem simple. And I know people hear that and they go, well, duh. If you stay on the diet, it works, right? It's not the diet itself, it's the ability to adhere. So if we can take our focus off of the diet itself and focus on the variables that allow us to adhere. So let's go back to the basal metabolic rate, or the metabolism offset that we talked about. How can we mitigate that, right? Well, and I know you know this, I'm preaching to the choir, but for the listeners, how can we mitigate that? How can we, if I cut my calories for 500 and my body's going to slow down by 400 and offset everything that I'm doing, even though I'm starving and all of that, how can I beat that system? It's easy to beat that system, because if you can change your body composition, right, and you can have a greater muscle mass than you have now, and a different composition with regard to fat slash muscle and so on, then you will be able to offset that. You'll be able to block that. You'll be able to stop that. And not only will you be able to stop that, your body from offsetting your efforts, you will be able to engage it almost like turning a CIA agent or something. You will be able to make your body your own asset, and it will start to work for you. You can actually turn it the other way. Not only can you stop it from reacting like that, but you can turn it into a machine that burns calories while you're doing a podcast, right? And how do you do that? You do that by changing your body composition. So here's where I become massively unpopular, right? Because uh, even though I won't give up this fight against the marketing machine and so on, because I have a message that isn't so sexy and well received and exciting. That period of time that you take to change your body composition so that you can offset these metabolism changes, you're not going to lose weight during that time. That's a so-called investment period, right? And the analogy that I use here is, well, I'll tell you what. Let's go back to the surgery analogy. So, if you did want to do surgery, you could do surgery. So these folks can lose weight, but you can't take the list and start on Monday because there are some things that are going to block you. In this case, it's lack of knowledge of anatomy, for example, or the instruments or whatever. So you're going to have to take some time to go to, say, medical school, learn that anatomy, learn what the instruments are called, and so on, and then you'll be successful with surgery. But the reason why it's difficult to talk about this in the mainstream media or be popular, as it were, is that while you're in that medical school period and you're doing your prep work so that you can be a successful surgeon, you won't be doing surgeries. And so when I come to the public and say, I can change your outcome for you, but you're going to have to put in this prep work first, during which you're not going to lose weight, at the end of which, though, you'll be a successful weight loss person. I guarantee it. Your outcome will be different. You'll do better. I am drowned out by the people who say, I can get you to lose 90 pounds in 90 days. I mean, they pushed me out of the way to get to the 90 pounds in 90 days guy, and then continue to fail.
Yeah, so that's very well said. And I want to pick that apart for a little bit. A couple of things here. One is we are absolutely guilty of that. And by we, I mean my industry, the health, wellness, fitness, nutrition industry. But there's a little bit of the blame that goes to the consumer as well, right? That consumer wants I want 30 pounds in 30 days. That's what I want. I want that fat loss detox smoothie that's going to melt fat while I sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is, to your point, this message of, hey, let's restore you, let's get you metabolically healthy before we worry about weight loss. It's a tough sell. That's hard to market. I know personally, I'll have people that come in, they pay me a not inconsiderable amount of money to lose weight. And very often the first thing I say, because they expect, okay, a diet, I'm going to do it this time. I've paid a lot of money. This is it. This is the time.
Mm-hmm.
And many times the first thing I say is, no, we're not going to change what you eat at all. We might add some things to what you're eating, right?
Right.
We're going to try, we're trying to get you to a place. I think what you're describing, and it's probably a good time to talk maybe about that catching point. I want to get you to a place where you have a chance at success for dieting. What that means
Yes,
is
right.
probably building some lean muscle mass, right? Which is metabolically expensive, which will have you burning calories while you sit on the couch or while you sit doing a podcast, etc. Right? So there is a lot to unpack there. Now, when we say this isn't sexy, right? And you say you get a little bit of pushback, probably from peers that are trying to sell something, as well as from
That's what it
consumers
is.
who say, well, I don't want a year long or maybe a 2 year long journey to this healthy body. What are
Right.
some shortcuts? Because we're always looking for shortcuts.
Right.
Now, in your book, and we mentioned this in the intro, the catching point transformation, you talk about these steps as staying full, creating space, training smart, these
Right.
in between days. Let's unpack a little bit about that. What might this journey look like? So somebody's listening to this, probably has, say, maybe lost and gained the same 20 pounds for the last 20 years.
Right.
What might that prescription look like?
So that person that you're describing, who's lost and gained, lost and gained, lost and gained, or failed over and over and over and over,
Right.
that is exactly the person that I want to talk to, right? And the thing that I want them to hear is that the secret to switching sides, right? If we're talking about, on one hand, having to always lean people, and we know who these people are, right? We see them carrying their yoga mats and smiling and drinking kale shakes, and we begrudge them because we think, how
Yeah.
can they be happy? What are they so happy about? When I do yoga and start my jogging and kale shake, it's like the worst thing of my whole life. I hate it. Sucks. There's no way I want to live like that. So So the message that I want people to understand is that those folks don't feel miserable, right? So there is a critical point, and this is why I titled the book The Catching Point Transformation. There is a critical point beyond which, and I apologize for saying it this way, but there is a critical point beyond which it doesn't suck. And so if I can get you to trust me on that, that there is a day beyond which, a point beyond which, and we've even defined it mathematically, if you can get to this exercise capacity, beyond this point, you will become one of them, which deep down is really what you want, right? Because we might begrudge them if we see them walking a crosswalk and we're in our car, but at the end of the day, we really want to join them. And so the way to make it so that it doesn't suck is to put this upfront time in. And you mentioned all the things you have to do to get there to reach the catching point, after which you won't need me, you won't need a trainer, you'll be on your own because you'll be one of them, right? And we can turn you across there without, and I'm not selling anything, right? Except maybe the book if you want to read the book. But it's not a product, right? It's things that we know from the medical literature that will allow you to cross over that point and join the group that you really want to be a part of and live a life where you enjoy this. It's not a miserable experience. But and you know, Post Hill Press published this book, so God bless them. But prior to that, for many years, when I brought this subject to the publishers, they would say, "There's no way I can sell that. There's no way I can sell. You
Yeah.
know, here is an idea. Here's an idea, or here is a message where you're going to have to take 6 months. You probably won't lose any pounds during that time, and we're going to turn you into somebody who will be successful with weight loss. That's never going to sell." I mean, it was just rejection after rejection because. And I wanted to, and you alluded to this, but I think it's important to make this point for your listeners. That is because most of the advertisements that you see, their goal is to sell a product, right? Our goal is to get you a different outcome and help you. There's a big difference there. If my goal was to sell you a product, then I would have renamed this book 90 Pounds in 90 Days 5 years ago, and I would have sold 1 million copies.
Yeah.
But my goal is
Yeah.
not to sell you a product. My goal is to inform you about something that you don't realize. It's a different way that results in a different outcome. I'm positive that you don't know about it now, and you want to know about it anyway, because a lot of these people feel bad, right? They're trying to articulate to me, do I have thyroid problems or is it
Yeah.
my genetics? Like they feel like I just can't get this done. Is there something wrong with me? So I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with you, and I also want you to know that there's another way home, and it's totally independent of like trying to sell stuff or have a business or anything like that. It's pure messaging.
Yeah, it is pure messaging, and I can see why that is a tough sell, right? I personally I'm up against that myself. I don't sell
Mm-hmm.
a drop weight quick. I'm not really interested in working in that space. But you had mentioned something that I want to touch on, and that's is there something wrong with me? So very often the fitness industry, the health and wellness industry, nutrition industry, it's very quick to point fingers at the dieter. You like the willpower, you like the motivation, you like the grit and the determination. Maybe you like the knowledge. Maybe you like my secret smoothie recipe or my secret workout or
Right,
diet,
right,
whatever it is, right? You lack something, there's something wrong with you. And dieting is already fraught with a lot of emotion, right? Most people will undertake a diet not out of a place of self-love and acceptance,
right,
but usually
right.
it's from a place of shame or guilt. And very often for those of us over 50, probably dieted a bunch of times and have quote unquote failed, right? And we're internalizing these failures as something's wrong with me. And then maybe even saying, well, maybe it's just my genetics, maybe I can't. And
Yeah.
so we've got this sort of finger pointing thing going on, but really what's happening is it's not the dieter's fault. In large part it's fitness media's fault, right? That we see all
Hmm.
these pictures of these very lean people and it's simple, just follow this program. Or
Right.
well-meaning medical professionals telling people, hey, you're overweight, you're pre-diabetic, your blood cholesterol, et cetera, et cetera. You need to exercise more and eat less. And that's just, that recipe has been given to people for quite some time, and it just
Right.
hasn't worked out very well. So before we go on, I'm going to make an example here. Let's just say Mrs. Smith. She's 58 years old, and she's lost and gained the same 30 pounds over and over and over again. And let's say she comes to us and we track what she's eating for a week, and we find out, lo and behold, she's eating about 1,700 calories. And by this point, she's really active, right? Let's say she's doing a CrossFit or some kind of burn boot camp or something. And she's just frustrated. Why can't she lose this weight? And so she comes to us and she wants a diet. And let's say we say, okay, well, if you're eating 1,600 calories, we're going to slash that down. Let's put you on 1,300 calories. And hey, we'll throw in maybe even another cardio day. And in the first couple of weeks, she's probably going to lose a little bit of weight. So she's thinking, okay, wow, this is working. But now she's in this very, very untenable, very unenviable, very unsustainable state, right? She's not eating enough calories, and she's working very hard. Her body's metabolically adapting, because our bodies are very incredible at finding homeostasis with what it
Right.
sees all the time.
Right.
So she's got this very low calorie, very high output. The body's like, holy shit, this is an emergency. So let's start doing all these biological processes to kind of
Right.
maintain here. Now, let's switch that around. Let's say she comes and she says, hey, I want to lose some weight. And she's doing all these things. First things first, okay, let's not do 5 days a week of boot camp, burn your booty
Right.
class, right? Let's back
Right.
off of that. Maybe we do 2 days of strength training and we walk on the other day, something like that. Let's
Right.
talk about your stress. Let's talk about your sleep, and let's start adding some food to your diet, some healthy foods. Let's
Amen.
start switching to some whole foods. Let's maybe prioritize some proteins or other things that maybe you're not getting right now. And she's probably thinking, well, hey, wait, I want to lose weight. You're telling
Right.
me to eat some more. Trust the
Right.
process. And she does, because she's a fictional, she's an
Yeah.
example here. And she trusts our process, right? And she's eating, and lo and behold, a couple months later, she's sleeping better. She's feeling better. She's getting
Hmm.
stronger. She's adding a little bit of lean muscle mass. She's eating more. And now let's say she's eating 2,000 calories and she's gained 1 or 2 pounds. Probably most of that from lean muscle mass, which is,
Correct.
again, a good thing, right?
Right.
And then ultimately, what we would like to do is get Mrs. Smith to a place where she's eating whatever a reasonable amount of calories is for her particular body. That's individual for all of us. Let's just say it's 2,400 calories.
Hmm.
And that she has the body that she wants, and that's her maintenance calories. That's a place that's sustainable for the rest of her life, as opposed to that other direction. If she
Correct.
eats 1,400 calories and loses 3 or 4 pounds, and then lo and behold, it doesn't work anymore. Go figure, right? And
Right.
so she eats 1,100 calories and she loses a couple more pounds, and lo and
Right.
behold, that doesn't work very long either. She plateaus and she starts
Hmm.
feeling worse.
Hmm.
In order for her to maintain that quote unquote diet, eat less and work out more, she has to do that for the rest of her life. That's not very sustainable. Whereas somebody who is at 2,500 calories, they have ideal body composition, they're eating enough, they're exercising
Hmm.
appropriately, that has that long-term sustainability. And I think
Correct.
that that's kind of the essence of your book, and what you're saying right now, right? Is, look, I want you to get healthy, and the weight loss will be a byproduct of that. Is that fair?
That is very, very fair, and you just articulated it beautifully, right? The analogy. Sorry, I have saw all these analogies, but the analogy that's in the book to illustrate exactly what you just said is that if you bring a flower home from the grocery store or wherever you might buy a flower that's still underneath the dirt, right, in a pot, and you water that flower, and in this comparison, that water is your exercise, right, your boot camp. You water that flower, and then you water it again later that day, and then you water in the morning because you really want it to grow. So you water it again the next day in the afternoon and the next day in the evening because you really want this thing to grow, right? But it's not going to grow like that. It's going to drown out, right? And that's in our comparison, the drown out is the lack of adherence. It's the quit. It's the wash out of the weight loss program, right? But if you take that flower home instead and following the water, you set it in the sun for 24 hours, right? You took away the boot camp, you took away the constant watering and beating down all the time, then you give that flower the time it needs, the necessary, in this case, sunlight, and in your example, the foods that you added in. you give that flower the opportunity to change its composition and to grow and to bloom and to become something else, right? You need to change your body into something else in order to join them, because their bodies, the always lean people, their body composition is different than yours. So you need to change your body composition into that. And A, you will no longer be miserable with all of these things. And B, as you mentioned, you can sustain that forever. Whereas if you take your current body, so here comes yet another analogy, my friend. If you take your current body, which is essentially if your job was to empty a pool, your current body is like a Dixie cup, right? You're going to try and empty that pool with a Dixie cup, try. But your current body isn't built for that. It's not going to work, right? That's why you live over here with the not always lean people who are upset and always trying to change. But if you can change your body by doing all the things that you said, I loved how you adjusted that 5 day boot camp to a 2 strength plus walk, right? That's counterintuitive to most people, but that is 100,000%
You're
exactly
doing
right,
less and eating
because
more, which is the opposite of probably what you thought you should
exactly.
do, right?
But what doing less and eating more does is it accelerates this process of recovery. And I think the recovery section of the book is the longest section of the book because it's the
Hmm.
most important. By
Hmm.
making the changes that you made, you're going to accelerate recovery. And what recovery means to the average user, the who's not in the field, is that's the body change that you want. That recovery, that time in between the training sessions, while you're adding in the supplements and food, that's when you're changing your body composition into somebody who A, won't feel like crap, B, will have the tools to be able to impact their weight loss with exercise because they'll have an increased exercise capacity, and C, they'll be able to live it. And not just be able to, it will be easy. I want everyone to again hear this. For those folks on the other side of the catching point, this is easy. It's not like, because there are a lot of people, including my mom, who would start a diet and then just feel like just overwhelmed with hunger and soreness and depression and disappointment. And so that's what that person thinks this lifestyle feels like.
Right.
So the idea that I'm just going to feel like this forever, I mean, nobody wants to feel like that forever. So I want people to understand you aren't going to feel like that forever. If you can get through and through this catching point by using the sort of interventions that you just described, and that's exactly what the book is about, you'll get to a point where this is enjoyable for you. You'll wake up feeling great, and you haven't been there yet. So for most people, you have not been there, because had you passed through and felt that feeling of it's a good feeling, a great feeling. It's not like, oh, I lost some weight so I'm happy. This is a different thing. This is a kinetic feeling that makes you want to go out and do yoga or get a kale shake, and it's a different feeling. So if somehow we can engage the trust of this fictional client of yours, for example, or anybody who might have failed diets before, to trust me and get through this catching point, once you feel that feeling of being on the other side, you will be home free because it's addictive.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. And I think that that is a lot of people in their mind, they associate having a lean body with the feeling of being hungry, of being miserable, of
Right.
choosing kale. Who wants to eat kale in
Lots
smoothies?
of
That sounds
people think
horrible,
that.
right?
Yeah.
But to your point, once you're on the other side, it is easy and it's
Right.
enjoyable. And there's this spiraling upwards that happens as we start to stack these little wins, right? We get a little stronger, so our sleep improves, which helps us get a little stronger, which
Right.
our body then is sending these chemicals. Hey, I'd like some nutrients, please, because I see that we're in the process of building things up. And for those of us over 50, as we start to get a little stronger and eat a little healthier, our hormones are starting to organize themselves in a more youthful way. So we're starting to
Right.
feel this vitality, maybe an increase in libido, and our energy is up. And that causes us to spiral up. And eventually, yes, you get to this catching point and this tipping point where this sort of lifestyle is more enjoyable. A lot of times I hear people say, well, it's just not worth it. I don't want to be lean and fit and healthy because I don't want to do what it takes. I don't want
Who
to live
would
that
who
life of
would
what it
who
takes.
would
And
want to feel like that all the time?
Yeah, who would want to feel like that all the time? And you mentioned in your book, you say that, and this is kind of counter to where we started this whole mind over matter thing, where you said that
Mhm,
just doesn't work. You say
mhm.
that changes to the body result in changes to the brain. So let's
Exactly.
pick that apart a little bit, because I think that's what you're describing here, right?
Absolutely, and the science slash doctor word for that is it's called retrograde neuroplasticity, and basically what retrograde neuroplasticity is a change to the body will go in the retrograde direction, the other direction, not mind over matter, but in fact from the body up, and then change the mind. So I love your fictional character, by the way. So we can keep going back to her. So when we made changes to that training program and we added in nutrients, right? That's going to change the composition of the body. And what that is going to do is feed back and make changes in the brain. It creates this positive feedback circuit. And that's how you end up wanting to do these things. Now, some listeners saying, oh, that's bullshit. No, but listen, I'm going to prove it to you. I'm going to prove it to you in two ways. First of all, there's a very famous professor, lifestyle nutritionist professor from Harvard named Lee Kaplan. And he has this quote that I love. He said, changing your exercise capacity, improving your exercise capacity alters your food choices toward healthy options, meaning that when you reach this critical exercise capacity, you literally want to eat these things. It's not a struggle anymore. But back to retrograde neuroplasticity. So we take it out of the weight loss arena for 1 second, and we treat all of these patients who have phantom limb pain, which is this pain in a foot that isn't there anymore, for example, because they've had an amputation related to war or disease or whatever it might be, right? And for the longest time, we were treating these patients with like meditation and psychological drugs and really trying this mind over matter thing, really running this into the ground. And then we decided, well, why don't we do something to the body, to the nerve that got damaged during all of this? And what we found was changing the body. Well, in this case, we froze the nerve in the leg. Changing the body, we then took magnetic resonance imaging, MRI scans of their brain, and we watched their brain change over time. So this phenomenon of retrograde neuroplasticity and their pain went away. So this phenomenon of retrograde neuroplasticity and matter over mind, outside in, however you want to word it, it is real. And so then this was one of the stories that I mentioned in the beginning in the intro. So then came the idea that if we can freeze nerves, because that's my day job, freezing nerves for pain, I wonder if we can block the nerve that's carrying the hunger signal. And would that be proof to people that if I change the body, I can change the mind, right? I can block the hunger feeling that people think they have in their mind, but it's really coming from the body. I can prove this. So we took a bunch of people, we brought them in, we froze the nerve that carries the hunger signal. And guess what? They weren't hungry. And when they restricted their calories, they were able to adhere and sustain. And the purpose of that was to prove exactly what we're talking about right now, which is changes to the body feed back and change the mind in a retrograde way. And if you so that was our little procedure and our little experiment to sort of prove that. But bariatric surgery, hundreds of thousands of pounds have been lost now. Diseases have been reversed, high blood pressure, diabetes. And these weren't willpower implantation surgeries. These were surgeries that took away the hunger hormone. These were surgeries that blocked the hunger signal. These were changes made to the body that retrograde feedback to the mind. And so that's what the Catching Point book is about, because I know not everybody can come in and get a procedure or get surgery. How can we make those changes to the body? Well, first thing they can do clearly is call you, because if they have access to you, you will help them do this. But if not, how can we make these changes to the body that will retrograde feedback to the mind without seeing a doctor? And so that's where you mentioned some of them already with fluidity and no static schedule and blah blah blah. So that's what the book is about.
Yeah, so that's very interesting, and I love the concept of kind of that outside in, and we all know the mind over matter, and certainly your mind has a big part in your holistic health, right? A lot of mindfulness practices and things like that go a long ways. But to your point, we're not going to willpower or motivate our way to a healthy, lean body. We just aren't. That's very good for getting us started on these kinds of endeavors, but it rarely carries us over through the long run. Now, I do want to go back and talk a little bit more and kind of pull apart some things that might detract us on our journey. But I want to spend a minute because that's kind of fascinating to me in the medical side. And you're probably the perfect person to ask this. So far, we haven't come up with a pill or a simple procedure that will just cause people to lose weight and keep it off, and outside of some pretty extreme examples.
Mhm.
Are we close to that? I mean, we have to be trying, right? There has to be billions of research dollars into this, because what we're talking about really is cause it. I mean, people have to change, and people have to actually alter what they are, their relationship with themselves or relationships with food. And this
Mhm.
is, we've already said, this could be a long process. This could be a 6 month process. It could be a 6 week process. It could be a 6 year process, depending on where you're starting from.
Mhm.
Where are we in terms of medical advancements and like really battling obesity?
So,
And what's
so
in
the
maybe around the
medical
corner?
the medical advancements have been significant, uh, and here are the ones that are successful in keeping with everything that we've been talking about. Those interventions that address adherence are the ones that result in a different outcome, right? For the sake of consistency, come back to this hunger nerve freezing procedure, right? That was something, the intention was to decrease hunger, because these are one of the things we mentioned, the some of the things that block people. One of them is definitely hunger. There's a subpopulation of people who are clearly blocked by this overwhelming, ravaging, insatiable hunger when they decrease that they can't endure when they decrease their calories. That's just one of them. So, for example, when we address those things that block people, in this case, hunger, we relieve the obstacle, then they do better. Okay. When you think about bariatric surgery, it's the same principle. Now, early on, whoever had this idea in the beginning thought, well, if we make a smaller stomach, people will eat less and so on. But that's not really how it works. They do take a portion of the stomach out, and originally intending to make the study, or I'm sorry, make the stomach smaller. But what we have realized over the last 20 years is that's not at all how bariatric surgery works. It turns out that the portion of the stomach that they take out is the portion of the stomach that produces ghrelin, that produces the hunger hormone. And so what was happening was not that people had a smaller stomach, but this hormone that's circulating and driving you to a food seeking mission on a survival basis that is absolutely not going to be resisted any more than you're going to go underwater and resist your body's demand for oxygen. You're not going to beat this ghrelin, okay? Uh, but they realized they were taking that out, and so
Yeah.
the stomach was no longer spilling ghrelin into the system. People weren't feeling this overwhelming hunger. An obstacle was removed, adherence changed, and people did better, right? And so those medical advancements, those pharmaceuticals, those procedures that focus on blocking, or I'm sorry, removing those things that block our adherence, those are the ones that end up with long-term sustainability. Those are the ones that end up changing the outcomes. That's where our focus has to be. If it were up to me, we would not create one more, although this will never happen, right? Because the people selling products will continue to do this. I don't want to see one more calorie restriction or calorie deficit arrangement that's given a fancy name and packaged up and then sold,
Yeah.
because that is not the key.
I'm with
The
you.
key is focusing on
Yeah.
those things that don't allow us to adhere. I mentioned the intermittent fasting paper in the New England Journal of Medicine. So the New England Journal of Medicine is arguably the most prestigious and most difficult to get into medical journal in the world, because it's so stringent about what it publishes. It only publishes those things that have the highest scientific integrity. I think last month there was an article showing that those people who are randomized to calorie restriction, plain old calorie restriction, versus intermittent fasting, and they both had the same outcomes. There was no advantage to intermittent fasting over calorie restriction. Well, no kidding, right? This is what we and nothing against intermittent fasting, but it was just another one of those things that caught fire in the media,
Yep.
and people can't resist. My wife, I don't think she'll get mad at me for bringing her up on the show, but my wife is like this super smart, insightful, just she really understands everything that we talked about, right? And for years, she's been successful with her own weight maintenance, weight loss, and so on. So she really, really gets it, okay? More than most people. But still, once a month or once every 2 months, you will call me and say, "Hey, did you see this? Do you think that this thing is really what it says it is?" And she knows. And
Yeah.
this is someone
Yeah.
who knows. And the reason I bring it up is because the temptation is just too much for people.
It
It's
is.
just too much.
Yeah.
But I think we have more sense in other spaces. Like imagine get rich schemes. We have a
Right.
little bit more logic and sense over there. Like we would all love to get rich tomorrow. But most of us, when we get the email that says, "Hey, my cousin left you $20 million. All you have to do is give me your social security number." Most of us can resist that. We say, "Yeah, it would be great to have $20 million tomorrow, but this probably isn't true and isn't going to work." But man, when it comes to weight loss, even
Yeah.
if on our conscious level we realize that this is it's not a scam, makes it sound bad, but something that is not going to actually result in this, we still give it a second look, man, because
Yeah.
it's just so tempting. It's so
We
tempting.
want it to, we want it to be quick and easy. We want it to be
Right.
simple, right? I mean, and when you say something like intermittent fasting, oh, okay, so if I only eat during this window, I'll magically lose weight. And yeah, to your point, it's a lot like somebody saying the same thing. Oh, well, if you want to be a millionaire in 90 days, here's the framework. Do it.
And
You
most
probably
most
won't. And you
people
would
know
probably
that that's highly
intuitively
true.
know that that's, well, unless you're close to being a millionaire, and then, maybe that just
Oh, no, no, but let
pushes
me
you over
stop
the
you
edge.
there. Let me stop you there because that's key what you just said. That's key,
Right.
right?
We're different starting places, right? If
Yes.
you're dirt
So
if you're dirt poor, you're not gonna be a millionaire in 90
right.
days.
So if
But
you're
if you
at a
got
place
900,000 investments in the bank, that 90-day framework might work great for you,
exactly.
right?
So if you one of my friends, I'm going to kind of steal what he said the other day. He really put it well when it came to money. He said a comparison that I could use, or the way that he might explain what we were trying to say is, if your goal was to save money, say $1 million, right, or save something realistic, like you want to save $1,000, right? But right now you owe Uncle Jimmy $500, so you're not going to be able to save that $1,000 in the next 30 days because you have to pay Uncle Jimmy first. And the key is, or the point that I'm trying to make here and drive home is that while you're paying Uncle Jimmy, you're not making any progress towards that $1,000. You are, but it
Right.
won't look like it on paper,
Yeah.
right? So while you're preparing to be a successful weight loss person on paper or on the scale, it won't look like you're losing any weight. But just like you are getting closer to saving that $1,000, the more you pay Uncle Jimmy, it's not written anywhere. You can't see it anywhere. You won't see changes on the scale, and you might not see immediate changes in your body composition, but you just have to trust that during this period that I'm paying Uncle Jimmy, right, that I'm getting to the catching point. Once I'm free of that debt, I'll have much more success saving $1,000. And once you make these body composition changes and change your exercise capacity and get to the catching point, I promise you after that, it's so much easier.
Yeah, 100% and very, very well said. Yeah, I love all of that. Obviously, that's right in my wheelhouse. So there you go, folks. But now, as we're wrapping up, I do want to touch on a couple of things before we go here. You bring these up a couple of times in your book, and we've touched on one of them a couple times. And that first one is sleep and the importance of sleep. So
Mm-hmm.
we talk on the show a lot about sleep and why it's important. But
Great.
just yeah, if you don't mind, in the context of getting to this catching point transformation, why is sleep so important?
Because that is the primary time when the changes are made that you want. We've talked for a long time about how we're going to change our bodies into the kind of bodies that the always lean people have so that this will be fun and easy, right? Those changes happen while you're sleeping. If you take this stimulus, whatever it might be, let's call it exercise. If you take a bout of exercise, your intention, and we didn't quite make this clear, and I know you understand this, but early on, the intention of that exercise bout is not to burn calories. You don't have the exercise capacity to burn a significant amount of calories. It's a total waste of time to even think about it that way. It's trying to empty a pool like a Dixie cup with a Dixie cup. The purpose of that original exercise bout or those early exercise bouts is to induce your body to change into the one you want that will be successful. And those changes, what we did talk about is in order for those changes to occur, we have to add in the right foods. However, when do those changes happen? They don't happen when you're working out. They don't happen when you're on the podcast and you're at work thinking about other things. When your body doesn't have anything else to do while it's sleeping, it will turn its attention to changing. And what it will say is, look, if we're going to have to do these exercise bouts, which it looks like we are, we need to make some changes. We need to change our muscle composition. We need to rearrange this and that and the other thing. And that will happen while you're sleeping. And and if you don't sleep, then all you're doing with these exercise bouts is running yourself into the ground. You'll end up in the place where your original fictional character was. And so it's during sleep that these changes occur. And a comparison I like to make to illustrate the point is for fair skinned folks, you and I are fairly fair skinned. If you go out into the sun, right, and then you go to sleep and you wake up the next day, your skin will have changed colors, right? Why is that? Because your body says, look, if we're going to have this happen, we're going to have to change our bodies into this in order to survive. And so while you're looking to change your body into the one you want, you if you don't sleep, you don't allow those changes to happen, and you just run yourself into the ground. It's critical.
Yeah, sleep is critical, and to your point, we're actually breaking down muscles when we're in the gym and we're doing other things, and we are repairing and recovering and building when we're sleep, specifically in those those deep sleep and REM phases. And I like how you talked about the purpose of exercise, right? Especially early on. But if the purpose of exercise is only the calories we burn while we do them, then we stop getting the benefit the second we stop doing them, right? But if the purpose is for these adaptations, these metabolic adaptations specifically, we those carry over long after we stop doing the exercise, right? So if I start
Oh, for sure.
I'm building up my work capacity, I'm building some strength, and we already talked about muscle is metabolically expensive. The body's like, okay, well, if we're going to have this sort of demand, we need to rearrange things so that we can support this. And that is, I think, goes a long ways towards what you're talking about, this more sustainable model, as opposed to, well, I'm going to go for this 30-minute run, and that's going to, my Fitbit's going to tell me that's going to burn X number of calories. Okay, good. Then I can factor in how much I can
Oh,
eat. That's
oh,
just, yeah,
oh, that
that's a
drives me
crazy way
crazy
of
because
looking at it,
that's
right?
another huge distraction that's just thrown
Sure
out
is.
there. That
I
unfortunately
burned this
people
many
don't focus
calories.
on.
Yeah,
It's pointless.
yeah.
I'm telling all of you right now who are in this space who want to make a change that you don't have the capacity to burn a meaningful amount of calories. Don't get mad at me. I'm just telling you the facts. If your goal, instead of losing weight, if your goal was to race a car in a car race like the Indianapolis 500, right? If you drive the car you have now, a Prius or something, and you pull up to the Indianapolis 500, you are not going to be able to compete there because you don't have the car you need to be successful with car racing, and you don't have the body you need right now to be successful with weight loss. So trying is ridiculous. It's no different than if I take Steve and say, I'm sorry, Kevin. If I take Kevin and I say, you can do surgery on Monday, go. You just don't have what you need to be successful with that task starting on Monday. So please just forget that. What we want to focus on instead is changing our body into one that doesn't get blocked when we eat clean and exercise, doesn't give us negative feelings, and allows us to join this group of people who so obviously enjoy this lifestyle.
Right on. Well said. All right. So, real quick here, as we're wrapping up, the other thing I want to touch on, and you just briefly mentioned this in the book, but I think it's important to hear, is the role of alcohol when it comes to building
Yeah.
this new lifestyle, this new body. And it's a tough one, right? Because this
Yeah,
is
I mean,
something.
you just
Look,
were just going down the list of my unpopular things.
yeah, yeah, right. We're really selling ourselves really well here. Hey, guys. All right. So this is going to take a long time. It's going to take a lot of work, and you're going to have to be dedicated. And not only that, but
Forget
you
that.
know,
This guy over here says I can do it in 30 days.
yeah, right. Have what you want. Okay, so I mean, we're not saying that abstinence is the key, and of course, maybe it is for some folks. But what are we saying? What is the role of alcohol, and why is alcohol not our friend, specifically when it comes to talking about transforming our body from this body where we are today to this this lean fit body?
Yeah, this is another hard truth, and
This is another hard one. Yep.
the only potential silver lining that I could put on this is that I'm only asking you to stay away from this until you pass through the catching point. Once you get to this point and across, and you join the folks who are smiling and enjoying all of this, then you can gradually add this back in if you like. The reason why you have to stay away from it now is because everything that we just talked about, if we just follow the sequence, I'm going to use an exercise bout to induce change in my body, which is going to happen primarily while I'm sleeping, so that I can transform my body into these people who enjoy this and can sustain this. If that is our goal, alcohol will screw you up at every single step, right? So I do my exercise bout. If I have alcohol, my exercise bout is gonna not be as good, right? So there, it screwed you up there. And I did it to induce change while I sleep, which will also be screwed up if you drink alcohol because it screws up your sleep. And so now you've minimized your change. And then the changes themselves are blocked, right? So if we think about the mental effects we get from alcohol, the so-called buzz, what the way that works is it kind of scrambles your cellular signals for a while, which sometimes, it's nice. It gives you a break from work and so on, and that's why people do it, and that's why we like it actually. But it also scrambles the cells everywhere else, your muscles, and so on. And so we began with, hey, we're going to have a calculated assault in the form of an exercise bout that's going to induce our body to go through these calculated changes, reorganize, make us stronger, leaner, and happier. And you block all of that when alcohol is on board. So until we get to and through that catching point, there's no upside to alcohol, and you're gonna go somewhere and they're gonna say, oh, there's resveratrol in alcohol, or
Yeah,
whatever it
right.
might be. But that's fine. If I put a vitamin inside of a dynamite stick and give it to you, that's kind of what you're running into there. So the hard truth there is, until you get through there, we have to kind of stay away from that.
Yeah, I've wanted to kind of bring that out, that what's happening when we're partaking in alcohol, specifically in these early stages as we're building, as you're mentioning, and changing some behaviors, is we're in effect we're negating our work, right? We're
Right,
just we're taking a step forward, two steps back. If
right.
you're doing the work in the gym and you're eating healthier, and we're trying to make this transformation, make this permanent transformation, that's just not helpful on that journey. So folks out there, just keep that in mind as you're embarking on this. Now, David, as we're wrapping up here, what's next for you? What's on the horizon?
Oh gosh, for me, so so part of the work that I do, I guess I wasn't ready for that question. So but I'll just be
Didn't
honest. I
mean to
hope that's
ambush
okay.
you with it. Yeah,
I'll be honest with you. So the
sure.
honest truth is exactly this. So we talked a lot about understanding where patients are coming from and trying to blow up that disconnect, and for sure blowing up the fat shaming and the negativity that kind of comes out of that disconnect, right? And essentially what it is it's an accepted kind of prejudice where, because we haven't been in that situation and we haven't felt those feelings, we therefore a don't acknowledge them, we say that they don't exist, and then b, we instead put all these negative qualities onto this person because they're not able to do something that, by the way, we have never done either, right? So that kind of thing on a bigger scale is what the rest of my life is going to be about. And what I mean by that is, there are patients not only in the weight loss arena who experience this. I treat a lot of patients with pain, and sometimes the pain patients can undergo the same kind of thing. They interact with a caregiver who hasn't actually felt what they feel, and so they then say, "Well, if I were this, I would do this, or I would do that." A whole bunch of crap that's based on nothing, and it creates a disconnect and it isolates the patient who needs our help, right? And so for me, for the rest of my time, I'm going to advocate for these patients, whether it be in the setting of pain, whether it be in the setting of weight loss. And sometimes people just get lost in the healthcare system and they need some guidance because they don't know where to go. And those patients are, regardless of whatever their individual abnormality might be, I want to be able to embrace them and bring them where they need to go by believing them, listening to them, acknowledging that I probably haven't felt what you have felt, but I have the tools to help you. So I'm going to lay down all the stuff, and I think I'm so great and I'd be able to do it if I were you. I'm going to dispense with all of that, and I'm going to help you. So that's what's next. That's the rest of my time. That's
I
what I'm
love
going to
that
do.
mission. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And our industry could use a big dose of that. Not the medical industry, but the health and fitness and
Mm-hmm.
nutrition. We could use a huge dose of that empathy. And you brought up fat shaming, and there's a ton of that. And I think a lot of it's just unintentional, right? And it's from this place, as I'll call it, ignorance. Just from folks like you said, that a lot of these people that are fit and have always been fit and love being fit, they just don't have that comprehension of of the struggles and or even the physiological understanding that we're at different for me to maintain what I'm doing now is way easier and more enjoyable than somebody actually making a real transformation to get to that lean body state, right?
That's
And those are
so
different
profound.
states.
If you're going to
Yeah, they
pull a
require
soundbite, pull that one because that is such a
right.
profound statement that you just made. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think it's worth and important to interrupt you there and point out that what you just said off the cuff is so profound, so meaningful, and so true. And we do indeed need to get rid of that. And it's not any different than upper middle class white guys saying that if I grew up as a minority in a low income country or a low resource community, well, I would just buckle down and I'd become successful. Well, no, you wouldn't, because and what you just said, I can kind of sum it up in four words. You don't know that you'd be able to do that, and here's why: the conditions are different.
Yeah.
The conditions are different. And so if you've not been through it, don't assume you could or would be able to do it, because what I want people to understand and what you're saying, and you've just articulated so well, and I'm probably ruining it now, is that the conditions are different.
Yeah. Yeah, we could use a lot more empathy and a lot more advocacy. It sounds like that's what I heard when you were saying what's next for you, and you're just going, oh, that caught me off guard. I think that's fantastic. So, before we wrap up here, David, how can people get in touch with you?
Oh, great. Yes. Thank you for saying that, actually. So I have a website. It's drprologo.com, drprologo, drprologo.com. And that really sort of links out to everything, all the advanced interventional pain stuff that we do, the weight loss stuff that we do, the patient advocacy, anything that you might be interested in. We're involved in building education programs in Eastern Africa, and essentially the tagline that I want to have is that we're working to help human beings. We're trying to help human beings in this weight loss space and beyond. So anybody who has any interest in any of that at all, please come visit drprologo.com and let's see what we can do together.
Fantastic. Absolutely love it. All right, folks, I'll drop all of that as well as the social info into the show notes here. And again, that book is called The Catching Point Transformation, a 12-week weight loss strategy based in reality. I strongly, strongly recommend this book for everybody. And look, I'll be honest, I say that every time I interview a guest that has written a book because it's a polite thing to do. It's a nice thing to do. And I genuinely typically mean that. But in this case, I really do. And I know there's a couple of you out there that listen to this that are also in the person you are in the fitness industry, the nutrition industry. I strongly recommend this book for you specifically because of the things we just finished talking about, right? To have that empathy and to have that advocacy for your clients. And if you're somebody who's struggled with weight loss and maybe has felt like a failure in the past or just felt like this isn't for me, this is a fantastic resource. Strongly, strongly recommend it. So, David, I want to thank you again so much for coming on the show today, sharing your passion, your knowledge, and your insights with us. And I just wish you all the best in all your future endeavors and encourage you to keep up the great work.
Likewise, my friend. Thank you so much.